Hello, good afternoon. This is Al24 Breaking News, live from Algiers, and coming up next our program. A further 106,000 COVID cases have been recorded in the UK, and the new one-day record and the first-time daily reported cases have risen above the 100,000. U.S. health regulator authorized the first pill against COVID-19, and President Joe Biden said it marks a significant step forward on the path out of the pandemic. Hong Kong University removes Tiananmen massacre status amid a crackdown on dissent. Conditions in Lebanon today betray a slight toward the total failure of state institutions amid an implosive downturn of the country's economic and social indicators. A total of 37 deaths and 10 missing person reports were recorded at flood areas throughout Malaysia as of last night. Hello again, those were today's headline. The health authorities in China announced the imposition of precaution measures on the northern city of the Xi'an, which had 13 million people, to limit the spread of the new coronavirus. A month before the Winter Olympics in Beijing, authorities said in a statement that the residents of Xi'an stayed in their homes unless there is a compelling reason to leave, explaining that one person per family is allowed to go out shopping every 2 days. The prevention officer, the director of the organizing committee, has this to say about the spread of the infection.
Probably we will be able to limit the infections. The risk of the spread is high, but we are ready for this.
South Korea set a new record for COVID-19 deaths on Thursday as officials warned that the highly transmissible Omicron variant could soon become the dominant strain. In recent weeks, South Korea has been grappling with soaring infections and deaths after significantly relaxed restrictions in early November as part of efforts to return to pre-pandemic normalcy. The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency said as a record 109 people died in the last 24 hours, raising that the country's total number of pandemic fatalities to 5,015. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison yesterday ruled out a Christmas lockdown, saying that the hospitals were occupying and coping with a record surge in COVID-19 cases fueled by the Omicron variant. Australia is grappling with the more transmissible Omicron variant of the coronavirus as restrictions ease ahead the Christmas holidays after higher vaccination levels were reached. For the first time in the United Kingdom, the daily report cases have risen above 100,000 infections on Wednesday, with thousands of asymptomatic cases are likely growing undetected. Nabil Khazini.
For the first time in the United Kingdom, the daily reported cases have risen above 100,000 infections, with thousands of asymptomatic cases likely to be going undetected.
I feel like we have to learn to live with the virus. We can't really look at the numbers anymore because they're always going to get higher.
Case rates is causing real concern. Hospitalization isn't increasing sharply, and doctors say it's better to get prepared this time.
We're much better prepared this time around than we have been in the past. We've got good knowledge about this disease now. We've got good PPE, and we've done it before. We've also got new drugs which appear to be effective. So we're ready, but this is going to be a big challenge if we have a big surge at this time of year in the NHS.
Despite these high numbers, England is likely to impose new curbs before Christmas, after the British government decided the current data does not justify extra measures.
People that are self-isolating, as long as they test negative through a lateral flow test on day 6 and day 7, taken 24 hours apart, they can leave isolation.
In Scotland, changes to the self-isolation period are being considered to ease the pressure on public services as COVID cases begin to spike. Fully vaccinated people in Scotland must self-isolate for 10 days. After Christmas Day, the new measures will still last for other 3 weeks.
This will be disappointing, and crucially, of course, it will be disappointing to the people of Edinburgh, particularly young people who are looking forward to attending a lot of these events. And, you know, I absolutely recognise that disappointment.
In Wales, new restrictions are set to start at 6 a.m. in the morning after Christmas. Face masks are back. The rule of 6 people will apply to gatherings in regulated premises, such as hospitality, cinemas and theatres. And spectators at sports and large events will be banned.
Now entering a really serious phase of the pandemic. Wales will reopen after Christmas. But in order to do so safely, we have to do everything we can to go on protecting ourselves and taking care of others.
Countries in the UK decided to take different decisions to curb the spread of the virus, with new restrictive rules in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, while England decided to give its people more freedom during their holidays.
In the same line of thought, more than 100,000 COVID-19 cases have been detected in the UK on a single day, a record since the pandemic began. It is the largest daily rise in confirmed infections since the pandemic began. A further 140 people had died within 28 days of testing positive for the coronavirus. Europe is once again seeing a surge of COVID-19 cases and new measures are being taken across the continent. Zara Ferjani on what follow.
In some parts of the European countries, the increase of COVID-19 has been compounded by the emergence of the new Omicron variant. Some countries have taken steps targeting the unvaccinated, while programs are also being rolled out in several nations to vaccinate young children. Belgium will close cinemas, theaters and other indoor recreational activities as Omicron spreads. Museums, libraries and fitness centers will be able to stay open. The Belgian government is also urging people to get tested ahead of the holidays. Spain will make mask wearing outdoors mandatory once again, with the Prime Minister set to pass a law by decree. The country reported record high COVID-19 infections as the Omicron variant takes hold. Authorities in Catalonia, one of the country's most populous regions, announced bringing back restrictions, which include a 1 a.m. curfew, the closure of nightlife and capacity limits. Germany will limit private gatherings to 10 people and close nightclubs ahead of the new year as the country faces a massive fifth wave of COVID-19 due to the Omicron variant. Large events such as football matches will be held without an audience as part of new restrictions that will come into effect on December 28th. Restrictions already in place target mainly the unvaccinated, with proof of vaccination or recovery required to enter non-essential stores, among other things. Portugal announces new restrictions over Christmas and the New Year. Working from home will become mandatory. Bars and nightclubs will also be shut down from Saturday. People will need to test negative for the virus to access cinemas, theaters, sport events, weddings and baptisms until at least January 9th.
Canada will temporarily expand support programs to help people and businesses hit by the Omicron variant of COVID-19. Ottawa said, warning people that worse to come as the virus spreads threats town. The country's chief public health officer urged Canadians to take precautions, telling a briefing that the situation can rapidly get out of the hand. Anyway, the highly contagious Omicron variant has prompted several of Canada's 10 provinces to reimpose restrictions. Quebec said that gathering of people at private homes and restaurants would be cut to 6 from 10. starting from the next week on Sunday.
We made a promise at the beginning of the pandemic to have everyone's backs, as long as it took, as much as it took. That was the right thing, not just to help minimize the impact of the health crisis, but also to ensure that our economy could handle the shocks that this crisis is facing.
The head of Nigeria's primary care agency stated that his country destroyed about 1 million doses of expired vaccine for the coronavirus, which might lead to a crisis in the vaccination process in the African country. Hussein Berkan.
The Nigerian authorities have destroyed about 1 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine donated by some countries to Abuja, and their validity is about to expire according to government sources. Faisal Shuaib, executive director of the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, highlighted the Nigerian government transparency in its vaccine delivery strategy and called Nigerians to have further faith in the vaccination program.
We have come through in our promise to all Nigerians to be transparent in our delivery of vaccines. These vaccines did not expire before we took the decision to withdraw them. Today is an opportunity for Nigerians to have further faith in our vaccination program.
The expired doses were destroyed at a landfill a week after the nation announced it will no longer accept donates vaccine near the end of their shelf life. Nigeria tests their vaccine before they are used, often voiding the expiration date of the vaccine in the process.
U.S. health regulators authorized the first pill against COVID, and President Joe Biden said it marks a significant step forward that decreased the surge. U.S. health regulators authorized the first pill against COVID, and President always keeps saying that this is going to be a significant mark toward finding a solution against the pandemic.
Thanks to the progress on vaccinations this fall, we've gone from nearly 90 million adults in July who had not even started their vaccination process to fewer than 40 million today. Still too many, but down from 90 to 40. All these people who have not been vaccinated, you have an obligation to yourselves, to your families, and quite frankly, I know I'll get criticized for this, to your country. Get vaccinated now. It's free. It's convenient. I promise you, it saves lives. And I honest to God believe it's your patriotic duty.
Hunger Relief Organization Feeding America estimated that the pandemic could cause 17 million more people to become food insecure, bringing the total of at-risk Americans to about 54 million. According to an NDU survey, 50% of households and 50% of households as well, and with children, reported food insecurity during the early stages of the crisis. Meanwhile, nearly 40% of all food in America, amounting to about 1.8 billion pounds, goes to waste. On Wednesday, British officials approved that the use of the COVID-19 vaccine for 5 to 11 years old children, facilitating the ways for kids in that age group in Cayman to vaccinated. Islam Seed.
The UK Pharmaceutical Medical Product Regulatory Authority approved a new pediatric formulation of Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine after determining it to be safe and effective.
If the expected standards of safety, quality and efficacy were not met, a new vaccine for children would not have been approved. After careful examination of all available data, she came to the conclusion that there is solid evidence that children in this group are at positive benefit risk.
UK regulatory approval for the 5 to 11-year-old vaccine will occur almost 2 months after the United States approves the use of the vaccine for children of that age group. These children receive another vaccine formulation of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine, which contains 1/3 of the dose given to adolescents and adults, and children receive the vaccine with smaller needle. Children receive 10 micrograms of the vaccine compared to 30 micrograms of the elderly. The Compass contacted the Public Health and Governor's Office for information on when pediatric doses will be available. In June, with MHRA approval, a vaccine for children over the age of 12 was offered here, in a detailed review of the side effects in vaccinated children. RAIN found that the overwhelming majority are associated with the mild symptoms, such as arm pain and flu-like illness, which introduce a comprehensive safety monitoring strategy to control the safety of all COVID-19 vaccines approved in. The MHRA said in a statement that it was working closely with other international regulatory and public health authorities, taking into account global data on the use of the 5 to 11-year-old vaccine.
A famous statue at the University of Hong Kong marking the Tiananmen Square massacre was removed late on Wednesday. The statue showed pallid corpses to commemorate pro-democracy protesters killed by Chinese authorities in 1989. It was one of the few remaining public memorials in Hong Kong commemorating the incident, which is a highly sensitive topic in China. Its removal comes as Beijing has increasingly been cracking down on political dissent in Hong Kong. Ukraine's military has conducted combat exercise using U.S. anti-tank missiles in the conflict zone with separatists in the east of the country. While tensions with Russia rise, Ukraine, which is seeking to join NATO, has since 2018 received a series of shipments of U.S. Javelin arms and missiles, which has drawn criticism from Moscow. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that the U.S. has indicated its readiness to start a dialogue with Russia on security guarantees early next year. Hussein Berkan.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov announced that discussions on the security guarantees initiative presented by Moscow to NATO and the United States of America will start early next year. Jake Sullivan, White House National Security Advisor, stated earlier this week that the U.S. has been and is always ready for dialogue.
We have been clear as the United States, and just yesterday the 30 nations of the NATO alliance were clear in a statement that came out of the North Atlantic Council. We're prepared for dialogue with Russia. We've had dialogue with Russia on European security issues for the last 20 years. We had it with the Soviet Union for decades before that. That has sometimes produced progress, sometimes produced deadlock. But we are fundamentally prepared for dialogue. Russia has now put on the table its concerns with American and NATO activities. We're going to put on the table our concern with Russian activities that we believe harm our interests and values. That's the basis of reciprocity upon which you would pursue any kind of dialogue.
It was agreed that the first round of talks would take place early next year between Russian and American negotiators, which their names have been determined and are acceptable to both parties. For its part, Vladimir Putin stressed that the West must understand that Russia has nowhere to retreat.
What they do now on Ukraine territory, or what they plan to do, is happening, not thousands of kilometers from our state border, but at our gates. They must understand that we have nowhere to retreat. Armed conflict and bloodshed are absolutely not something we would choose. We do not want such a scenario. We want to solve problems using political and diplomatic tools, but also to have explicit, understandable, well-defined legal guarantees.
Lavrov stated earlier this week that Russian President Vladimir Putin discussed this issue with his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron and the new German Chancellor Olaf Scholz recently, and assured them that Moscow would raise the issue of guarantees.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has repeated the UN's commitment to supporting crisis hit Lebanon and urged the country to hold parliamentary elections next year on time. Guterres' visit comes as Lebanon struggles with crippling political paralysis and an economic crisis, and he also expressed his solidarity with Palestinian refugees in Lebanon. Marwa Blayor.
After his three-day visit, during which he repeatedly urged Lebanon's political leadership to work together to resolve the economic and financial crisis, Antonio Guterres, the United Nations chief, warned that the international community is unlikely to come forth with much-needed support for Lebanon.
These past 2 days, I have urged Lebanon's political leaders to work to implement reforms that respond to the demands of the Lebanese people for greater welfare, accountability, protection and transparency in order to restore hope for a better future.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said Lebanon's financial collapse was caused by something similar to a Ponzi scheme.
As far as I understand, what has happened in Lebanon is that Lebanon was using something similar to a Ponzi scheme.
Lebanon is in the third year of an economic meltdown that began in 2019, when the financial system collapsed under the weight of huge state debt, the result of decades of corruption and mismanagement, and the unsustainable way it was financed. The crash has caused the Lebanese pound to lose more than 90% of its value, and people have been frozen out of their deposits in the paralyzed banking system.
I visited Tripoli in North Lebanon and today Tyre in the south. And I was very moved when listening to first-hand testimonies of how the crisis is impacting people's daily lives. People expect their political leaders to listen to their needs and to restore the economy, including through a functioning government and state institutions and by effectively fighting corruption.
Guterres expressed his solidarity with the Palestine refugees. He apologized for the inability to secure all the necessary support for students and parents and stressed his determination to raise the necessary funding for UNRWA to continue providing its services. He also promised to continue to work for a peace process which would result in a two-state solution and which would end the plight of the refugees. On the other hand, the UN peacekeeping force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, denounced an attack on its troops after videos surfaced of local residents in southern Lebanon stomping on a UN vehicle and attacking it with stones.
Inspector General of Police Tan Sari Abdullah Sani said that the death toll from severe floods sweeping the country was now 37, with at least 10 people still missing. According to the inspector, the floods have also displaced 68,3400 people from 80,000 households across the peninsula. He urged those affected to seek shelter at temporary relief centers.
7 states are severely affected: Perak, Kuala Lumpur, Selangor, Negri Sembilan, Melaka, Pahang, and Kelantan. The worst hit area is Pahang. In addition, at 2:30 today, we found 23 locations or areas where water is at warning levels. These areas are near rivers and 13 are under danger status. 9 of these rivers are in Pahang, 2 in Kelantan, 1 in Johor and Selangor. The relevant agencies have said the water is almost spilling over, and there could be a possibility of further flooding in the days to come.
The United States exempted U.S. and UN officials who conduct authorized dealing with the Taliban from sanctions in a decision aimed at facilitating the delivery of aid to Afghanistan. The U.S. Treasury has issued 3 general licenses designed to facilitate the flow of aid to Afghanistan. 2 licenses allow U.S. officials and certain international organizations, such as the United Nations, to enter into transactions related to Taliban, as long as those transactions are official. Zionist forces shot dead Palestinians in a car they were pursuing in the occupied West Bank. Palestinian paramedics said that the Zionist military said troops shot a Palestinian who had fired at them from a vehicle. The incident follows several Palestinian attacks on Zionists in recent weeks. Palestinians also complain of attacks by Zionist settlers whose residence in the West Bank the international community considers illegal. Saudi-led coalition fighting Yemen said its launcher strikes against military camp in the capital Sana'a on Thursday. The coalition said it destroyed 7 drones and weapons thrown at the camp, Saudi state TV reported, adding it was in a response to an armed drone launched from North Yemen towards Saudi's Red Sea region of Jizan. The World Food Programme has said it has been forced to cut aid to Yemen due to the lack of funds and warned that there will be a surge in hunger there in the war-torn country in the coming month. nearly 8 years of fighting between Saudi-backed government forces and Houthis rebels in Yemen has created what is United Nations has called the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Tunisian court on Wednesday issued a verdict in absentia sentencing former President Monsef Marzouki to 4 years in prison after he criticized President Kais Saied and called for protest. The court found against Marzouki on charges of assaulting the external security of the state. Marzouki, who lives in Paris, has described Said's seizure of power in July as a coup, called for protests against him, and urged that major international meetings of French-speaking countries be moved from Tunisia. In an interview that was broadcast on the sarcastic conservative internet site Babylon B, Elon Musk ridiculed CNN, railed against wokeness, calling it one of the biggest threats to civilization.
Tesla and SpaceX CEO Elon Musk ridiculed CNN in an interview with the ironic conservative website Babylon B, criticizing the wake-up call. He called political accuracy one of the greatest threats to world civilization.
Shut down Chappelle? Come on, man. That's crazy. So do we want a humorless society that is simply rife with condemnation and hate, basically.
And no forgiveness, right?
Yeah. At its heart, wokeness is divisive, exclusionary, and hateful. It basically gives mean people a reason, it gives them a shield to be mean and cruel, armored in false virtue.
The interview aired Tuesday night. Musk protested comedian Dave Chappelle's attempt to cancel, saying that awakened heart virus was probably one of the greatest threats to modern civilization.
I mean, generally, I think we should be aiming for like a positive society, and that it should be okay to be humorous. We should like wokeness basically wants to make comedy illegal, which is not cool.
During the interview, Musk also took aim at the CNN as one of the network's producers, John Griffin, was charged with a series of shocking sexual crimes against minors this month. Griffin was arrested just days after CNN fired host Chris Cuomo amid allegations of sensual misbehavior and an inquiry into his attempt to defend his brother against similar harassment charges. Musk also cast a shadow over the metaverse of fellow tech CEO Mark Zuckerberg on Tuesday, commenting that he doesn't want to be like an old man who rejects the internet, and he is currently unable to see a compelling metaverse situation.
Ending up with sport, Ferran Torres, Man City players, is almost in Barcelona this winter, and Real Madrid, the Galacticos, are still moving forward in La Liga. More to be clarified in this report.
Barcelona and Manchester City are engaged in talks over a deal that would see Ferran Torres head to the Camp Nou. On Wednesday, December 22, the Blaugrana raised their offer to €55 million plus €10 million in add-ons for the 21-year-old after their first two bids of €45 million and €50 million were turned down by City. The Premier League club told Barcelona that Ferran would cost them €70 million, and now they are close to that figure. The offer is being contemplated at the Etihad Stadium, but it now seems that Ferran is getting ever closer to returning to Spain and joining Barcelona. Real Madrid have played their final match of 2021, and their 2-1 victory over Athletic Club means they lead Liga Santander table by 8 points over Sevilla. All the goals were scored in the opening minutes, with Karim Benzema's first goal in the 4th minute and the second in the 7th minute, when a touch from Unai Nunez played them through on a goal. Sergio Ramos was sent off for Paris Saint-Germain in just his 3rd game for the club as Mauricio Pochettino's men scrapped a draw away to Lorient on Wednesday. The ex-Real Madrid icon has had a tough time so far in the French capital, with injury and lack of fitness severely restricting his playing time. Manchester City defender Benjamin Mendy, who was initially charged on August 26, now faces 7 counts of rape and 1 of sexual assault relating to 5 women. Reporting restrictions have been lifted after Mendy appeared at Chester Crown Court for a hearing prior to his trial, which was put back after initially being scheduled for January.
That's all for now. Thank you so much for being with us. See you at 6. Peace be upon you.